Take stack, I'll make notes on the board,
Okay, great.
as necessary.
So yeah, shoot up a hand. Okay, so we're gonna go 1, 2, 3, okay?
Yes, some of us are interested in co-op promotion, and we were wondering if you have any plans regarding co-ops, and also if you do, we were thinking along the lines of like a co-op incubator and helping people transform some businesses into co-ops, which might be an option. Just, I mean, we would like to get your...
Yeah, you mean worker-owned businesses structured well so that the wealth is shared as profits are made in the business?
Yes.
I love this model, and thank you for bringing it up because honestly it has not been top of mind to me. But I love it, and I have done a huge amount of entrepreneurial development, and it fits right in there. There was a panel on this. I think it was around when there was a public banking conference, and there was a panel on worker-owned co-ops that I went to because it's really fascinating stuff, and there's some people actually up in Espanola who know a lot about it. So, my answer is that it's absolutely interesting. One of the things that we've been talking a lot about is entrepreneurial development. I believe entrepreneurial development, like entrepreneurship itself, should be lean and mean and iterate and improve and make investments in different models and different types of businesses because it's more about sort of planting a lot of seeds and seeing what really thrives. And I think co-op, this is a great way to evolve our economy and to really work on growing some businesses that have a good model for sharing the wealth and the profits with employees could be really important. And we have resources in the area. And in my experience, what you need to do around, we launched an accelerator, anything, and I would say an accelerator rather than an incubator, which is usually a program rather than a building around here. When we define our terms, but an accelerator, it's like a boot camp. You know, we do one BizMix that we would love to have a co-op in. One of my favorite projects that I founded is Mix Santa Fe. And as part of that, we do a startup business plan competition, which is agnostic about the business model that anyone brings. We've had nonprofits, we've had for-profits. We haven't had a co-op yet, but that would be cool. And, you know, what BizMix does is find good mentors. So, you know, it's about finding the people who know about it, who know how to do it well. Positive Energy is a worker-owned business. I don't know if there's a technical definition of co-op. They don't usually use that word. But it's a pretty good model, I believe, of one. There are these folks up in Espanola who have done it. And, you know, we've actually, because Santa Fe, we have a big name, we could probably bring in some national experts and really looking at, you know, creating a program where I think that would be fantastic, where businesses could learn about how to set up a good co-op and get some of the basics of governance and, you know, the legal foundation that any business should have. But that's a wonderful idea, and it brings back an old passion that I hadn't been thinking actively about, but I remember when I went to that panel, I thought we need this because, frankly, I have been looking for another model to empower workers that is entrepreneurial rather than unions, and so I went to this, and co-ops are a great model, and we should embrace it as a community, especially if there's interest, because demand is always the key part. Is there demand out there for people who will, you know, engage in a program?
Sorry to interrupt, but just one aspect of it that I think would be interesting to develop with expertise is different degrees of it. Because I find, like in my case, I'm a dentist, so in my office, I would love to have some degree of that. But it's difficult because there's different tiers. You know, you can't have, you know, an assistant telling the dentist what to, you know, so you have to have some hierarchical level. But it would be nice to have it formally established so that there's, you know, profit sharing, but also some degree of power sharing. But, you know, that's what I'm kind of thinking.
And I think those models exist. I think they're out there.
Okay, so we'll go to number 2. Question number 2.
I'm Tony Quilico, and I've heard in the past that Santa Fe considered having its own bank and also its own electrical system to take over from PNM. I haven't heard anything about that, and I think PNM is a criminal operation. Thank you.
Yes, I can comment on that. There was a really broad assessment done, and to buy, PNM owns the infrastructure on our poles. They own a lot of the poles. And to buy the infrastructure from PNM was going to be $300 million. And this was a group of university students who did an initial assessment in the Housing and Community Development Department, which is where I work. And they did it for the energy specialist, Nick Schiavo, who's worked on a lot of solar projects. And I think that the feeling was that that price tag, particularly that we've been in almost a decade of recession, that it was a non-starter. But it's certainly, and one of the things we need to do is really lobby PNM to let us do community solar. Because right now that's prohibited by state law, and we could benefit hugely from being able to find a place to put in a publicly owned, a municipally owned solar system and have it be much bigger and provide a lot more, because we have to get to renewable energy. We have to get to distributed models. It doesn't make sense to burn coal and ship it in from a long way away, but the grid and the reliability of keeping electricity on in everybody's homes should also not be taken for granted. And that's why PNM sort of gets to be who they are. Because, and arguably some people say that some of the blackouts that we've seen in the past couple of years are because PNM stopped investing in the infrastructure because of what they were hearing in Santa Fe. I don't know. That's wild conjecture. On the public bank, there's a public banking task force. There was a resolution that passed that I actually was the staff on to do an initial feasibility study about establishing a bank. And the principle, I think a lot of people agree on, which is banking's profitable, keep those profits in the community. Now, what happened was that we had a very smart woman named Katie Updike really dig into a lot of the details, and what she said was, first you need to do financial management better. And you can call some functions public banking, and it would be good to formalize them as public banking functions, such as if one part of the city takes a loan from the water fund, where there's often money, more money than other places, and you could pay back that loan with interest and in essence deliver some value to the water fund, which gets the wealth of loaning that money to other parts of the city. And this is done. This is done anyway, that there's sort of a borrowing amongst city funds. So that was the recommendation. I tend to agree with what was recommended there. If we want to go all the way to chartering a bank, which is where a lot of folks that talk about Santa Fe having a bank go, I think we've got to take the first steps rather than go all the way down the block to chartering a bank. And we need to get the city's fiscal management to make sense. And that we should be really documenting intercity loans and understanding exactly the terms in which those loans operate, so that the water fund gets value out of having a surplus, even if the street fund really needs the cash because we've got so many potholes.
Okay, great. So we'll go to question number 3.
Okay.
Hi.
You started touching on my question with the gentleman's first question. Could you drill down more on how some concrete ideas on building the economy, attracting better paying jobs, good paying jobs, growing the employment for the city?
So I'm not sure we truly need to grow employment. I think we need to evolve. Our population goes up by about 40% any given day of people commuting in. So, and to some extent, I really think the future is people working less but better. And that's a higher quality of life, and that we should think about economic systems in a more comprehensive and inclusive way. But in evolving our economy, we do need higher wage jobs, because right now, and we need to increase affordability in housing. Because right now, a measure I like to think about is the gap between wages and housing costs. or how many people are cost burdened by housing, which means they're paying more than 30% of their income to their housing and utilities. And if we do have a very high proportion of that, and that's not good. But I'm not going to talk about housing now, which I do think is actually the biggest thing for our economy, that we need workforce and affordable housing. But I think your question is more along the lines of evolving the economy and growing jobs. So investing in entrepreneurial training, always, always, always. It's cheap and it's broad-based and it's rooted deeply in a successful community, having businesses of any different stripe, and this is the strength of BizMix. We train culinary, we train somebody who wanted to, have a shoe top that would click on, so you could have replaceable shoe tops but keep the same bottom for nurses and doctors, so manufacturing kind of industrial shoes. We've had designers, we've had grow bag manufacturing, we've had restaurants, we've had all sorts of things. And I think we need to keep doing that entrepreneurial training. I also think that we need to look for special areas, and very often it's around energy. So if there's a group of businesses that want to be co-ops, that's a good place. I think we may have, Alicia hasn't heard this yet, this is a new one I've been working on, but I think we have a real opportunity in educational technology to partner with our public schools. Santa Fe is the perfect size to be an innovation lab, and there's a lot of other people who've worked on ideas like this, but if we partner with the public schools, which is something I'm big on because I sit on the school board and I see that education is really fundamental economic development, we could work on technology, and the schools have a technology note, which is in essence a bond that pays for a lot of technology upgrades in the schools. We could work on technologies in this growing field, and we can test them in our public schools to see if they work. So already my son is getting math from an app that gives him harder questions the more he gets right. I would love to see an app where teachers can put what classroom supplies they need, and somebody can just say, all right, I'm taking that teacher, and bring them paper towels and pencils because they really need them. I would love to see us work on all sorts of different things. I also think we have to look at the film industry. There's something in the broadband infrastructure. Our broadband manager has a really fantastic idea which finally makes actionable what everybody has said for a long, long time, which is post-production for films. So CGI, animation, special effects. And that is, in essence, a broadband solution which would give us a really fast computing capability at this end and one in Santa Monica, because then we could really actually do CGI stuff, and that would bring in business from the coast, not just to do post-production for the films we make here, because that, it doesn't even make sense actually. What we need to do is attract business for the films that are made elsewhere, and that is how we'll get post-production working around the clock. I also want to, and I shouldn't ever forget to say this, because I want to evolve the city's workforce, and I think we could be a leader in that. Again, on the idea that Santa Fe is a good size to be a lab. We're big enough to test things in significant ways, but small enough to really be a community around it. I think we need to look at flexibility in working for the city's 1,500 positions. While I was there were particularly women with young children who asked to go to fewer hours than 40, 32 mostly, so that they would have the flexibility to pick up their kids. This request tended to be denied in the last few years. I had an employee who did 32 hours a week, and she was my most productive person. And you wouldn't have known, and that's across the board, just anybody in a position. And I think it was because she was motivated to make every hour count when she was there, because she wanted that time off and very protective of it. So looking at job shares, looking at, when people want it and when it's appropriate and when we can increase quality of life to evolve our workforce, and that saves money. So that we can, get people in. Technology is a big issue in the city, but using that market of what the city needs developed and using what the schools need developed, I think are some of the economic solutions we should look at. So by and large, I think we want to I mean, we have to keep doing tourism. It's the goose that lays the golden egg in this town, and a basis for us to grow entrepreneurs in all sorts of ways too. I think we need to do entrepreneurial training. I think we need to use city and public resources better. In other words, the budgets for these organizations, the city, but also in partnership with the schools. And I think we need to fundamentally always look back at the education system, because that is how everything gets invented. I think we say that 80% of the jobs that today's sixth graders will have don't yet exist. So we need to look at the gig economy, we need to understand that productivity, understand what's holding back, and we've always done that in Santa Fe. People have freelanced here or just made ends meet with a variety of jobs forever. So let's embrace what we know, and we can lead the world into a new economy as we see the trends going. And that's, I spend a lot of time nerding out on economic trends, but we know our economy's changing and we need to embrace it.